Most people know that they should be eating a little bit healthier, but the issue is that nobody agrees on what eating healthy means. And the funny part is that if you ask 10 different experts what a healthy diet is, you're gonna get 10 different answers. A healthy diet is certainly not defined by a strict set of rules of good foods that you should be eating and bad foods that you should be avoiding. And if you've been going down that route, you've been led down the wrong direction. Instead, it's about following a few key principles that help you feel good, meet your nutritional needs, and allows your diet to be sustainable, meaning that you can stick to it long term. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 key principles of a truly healthy diet and how to apply them in a way that feels flexible, realistic, and supports your goals. Let's get right into it. The first principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should meet your nutritional needs. Okay, those are both macronutrients and micronutrient needs. When it comes to macronutrients, obviously we're talking about proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. We don't want to be deficient in any of those. And then when we're talking about micronutrients, we're talking about vitamins and minerals. We don't want to be deficient in any of those either. And here's the thing, when it comes to most diet advice that you see online, it violates this first principle almost immediately, right? So if you follow any particular diet that puts strict restrictions around what foods to eat and what foods not to eat, let's say things like keto, or even a little bit more extreme like a carnivore diet, you are inherently by definition eliminating a ton of different food groups from your diet, right? So if you're carnivore, you're eliminating everything but animal-based foods. And the thing is that all food groups contain unique nutrients that are rich in those particular food groups, and they're hard to get in adequate quantities from other food groups. So if you're only eating animal-based products, for example, you're not going to be getting the vitamins and minerals that are rich and abundant in plant-based foods, right? And not just that, within plant-based foods, there are different food groups, and we should be consuming a wide variety of those. So things like legumes, think beans, chickpeas, lentils, nuts and seeds, right? We've got whole grains, we've got fruits, we've got vegetables. All of these food groups are rich in particular nutrients that we should be including in our diets. So carnivore is one example, but we could go the complete opposite as well and say a vegan diet where you eliminate all animal-based foods. From a health perspective, it's not the most optimal diet whatsoever, because again, animal-based foods also contain nutrients that are hard to get in adequate quantities in plant-based foods. So we don't want to be eliminating any sort of whole food group for no particular reason, right? The only reason you should completely eliminate a food group is if you have a particular sensitivity or allergy to those foods. But unless you have a particular allergy or sensitivity to certain foods, it does not make sense to completely eliminate foods from a health perspective. And obviously, guys, when I'm talking about foods here, I'm talking about whole, minimally processed foods. Of course, eliminating things like certain junk food from your diet is not inherently a bad thing to do, right? But in general, any whole food group, we shouldn't eliminate it from our diet just because somebody online says that that particular food is bad for you, right? Like vegetables having anti-nutrients, that's a pretty common thing you'll hear online, or whole grains being high in things like oxalates, for example, or just sugar in general being bad for you, or not consuming fruit because it's high in sugar, right? Like it's all nonsense. It's all noise. It's all overly exaggerated. And the reason why I inherently bring up this principle as the first principle, again, is because oftentimes people define going on a diet by eliminating particular foods. And we shouldn't be thinking about dieting from the perspective of like, what am I not going to eat? We should be thinking of dieting from the perspective of what am I going to eat more of? What can I include in my diet to improve the quality of my overall nutrition? Right? It shouldn't come from a restrictive perspective, because inherently when you restrict yourself, you're eliminating certain things, and that may result in particular deficiencies. Again, macronutrient or micronutrient deficiencies. When it comes to micronutrients specifically, research clearly shows that a more diverse diet, a more nutritionally diverse diet, results in better health-related outcomes. That means that if you eat more foods, you will have better health outcomes, right? So it's not just about eating meat. It's not just about eating fruits and veggies. It's not just about eating whatever. It's about eating all of it, right? So you want to have whole grains in your diet, but also dairy, but also meat, nuts and seeds. You want to eat legumes. You want to eat fruit and vegetables. I might have said fruit and veggies already. I'm not sure. But you want to be consuming all of the major food groups. Again, because they all contain unique health benefits, because they all contain unique nutrients, right? So again, don't eliminate foods from your diet for the sake of eliminating foods. I mentioned that nutritional needs aren't just micronutrient needs, but also macronutrient needs. And the biggest issue I see here is that when people diet, they go way too extreme in terms of being in a deficit, right? So not only do they eliminate a lot of foods, they just end up eating very little. And so when you eat very little, you're just not getting sufficient nutrition from your diet, right? If you go from eating 2,000 calories down to like 1,200 calories, which is pretty common, like specifically women, I've heard so many women say, I eat 1,200 calories, I can't lose weight. It might be true for some. Many people underestimate how many calories they're consuming. But in general, if you're just reducing your caloric intake by a ton, it's going to be harder to meet your nutritional needs. It's going to be harder to meet your micronutrient needs, but it's also going to be harder to meet your macronutrient needs. It's going to be difficult to get sufficient healthy fat from your diet. It's going to be difficult to get sufficient protein to help fuel performance. It's going to be difficult, or I should say, to help fuel muscle growth. It's going to be difficult to get adequate carbohydrates from your diet to help fuel performance. And if you're consistently under-fueling, yes, you might lose weight, but you're not going to see improvements in body composition the way that you want to, because your sleep's going to be affected, you're going to be tired, you're going to be fatigued, you're not going to be recovering well. It's also going to affect your performance in the gym. If you're not performing well, you're not going to be improving strength, you're not going to be building muscle. So obviously, strength training, recovery, sleep, these things are incredibly important, and we want to make sure we can optimize those things. And nutrition is a big factor that influences those variables, right? So if your nutrition is affecting your ability to train, it's affecting your ability to sleep well, it's affecting your ability to recover, it's not really going to help you produce the results that you want in terms of improvements in body composition, even if you're quote unquote losing weight. So again, the first principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should meet your nutritional needs, both macronutrient and micronutrient needs, which means that you shouldn't be eating very few calories overall, and you shouldn't be completely eliminating particular food groups for no reason unless you have a particular allergy or sensitivity to a specific food or food group. The second principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should help you manage hunger and regulate your satiety. And for those of you guys that have never heard the word satiety before, it just means the opposite of hunger, right? So the sensation of feeling full is what we call being satiated. So your diet should help you regulate your hunger, and it should help you feel satiated. And when we talk about hunger and satiety regulation, it mainly comes down to three variables. One, how much total food we eat, because of course, if we eat more food, we're going to feel fuller, but it's obvious that we don't want to be eating or overeating a ton of food, because then, for example, if you have a particular fat loss goal, that's not going to be conducive towards that, right? Second, it comes down to food choices, so we can select certain foods that help us feel more satiated. And third, it comes down to when we eat. And many times people don't really think about nutrient timing as an important variable to focus on, but there's really cool research showing that nutrient timing definitely affects things like hunger and satiety regulation. It has a pretty big effect. And I want to talk about each of these independently. So first and foremost, when we talk about how much food you eat overall, I'm referring to your overall caloric intake, right? And I'm going to assume that most people, when they try to go on a diet, it's because they have a particular weight loss or fat loss goal. And in general, this one kind of goes hand in hand with the first principle. You don't want to reduce your calories too much, because if you reduce your calories too much, you're going to feel really hungry. You're not going to feel satiated. You're going to feel like you're starving. You're going to have more cravings. It's going to be harder to stick to your diet overall. You're going to have to use more willpower. And we all know that the more willpower you have to use, the less likely you are to stick to your diet, right? So what I encourage you to do is just to be in a slight to moderate deficit. If you are a more experienced dieter, if you compete in bodybuilding or you've been doing this for a long time and you have been through this cycle over and over again, you might be able to go into a more extreme deficit and be able to manage your hunger. But we all know that that's not sustainable long-term. And you guys all know that my message is all about long-term sustainability, right? And that's why I encourage you being in a slight to moderate deficit, maybe 10 to 15% below maintenance. Meaning that if your maintenance calories are like 2,500, for example, you want to be at like 375 to 500 calories below maintenance max. Really, that's what I would encourage. I think that was 15 to 20%. 10 to 15% would be like 250 to 375. But anywhere between 10 to 20-ish%, 20% being a little bit more aggressive, is fine. If you're new to this whole dieting thing, if you don't have healthy dietary behaviors, if you're just getting started in your whole fitness journey, I would encourage you to be on the slower to moderate side. And that's one of the things that we really work on with clients as well. It's like, hey, In the meantime, while we're focusing on improving our healthy behaviors, you're working on specific habits, you're learning how to train to help you build muscle, we don't want to add additional stress on top of that and be in a huge deficit because it just makes the whole thing more difficult and less sustainable. It's better to be in a slight deficit. Yes, weight loss is going to be a little bit slower, but it's going to feel more realistic. It's going to feel more sustainable. It's going to allow you to work on other dietary habits simultaneously, and the end result is substantially better overall. And I explicitly say that because those of you guys that are thinking or listening might be thinking, man, like, cutting calories by only 250, that's not a ton. And if your maintenance is below 2,500, that's even less than 250. That's not a lot. I'm not going to lose any weight at that rate. One, reframe the way you're thinking about weight loss. It didn't take you, 2 or 3 months to gain however much weight you've gained and you feel uncomfortable with. It's taken you a long time, right? So you shouldn't expect to lose all that weight in a really quick time either. And the goal, it's perfectly fine to have a weight loss goal. I obviously support people losing weight if they want to. But the main focus shouldn't be just how much weight am I losing. It should be, am I developing healthy habits? And being in a slow to moderate deficit allows you to develop those healthy habits because, again, it's just less extreme. And if you develop those healthy habits, you will lose the weight as a byproduct. It's just going to take a little bit longer, but you're more likely to keep the weight off. Because truthfully, most people lose weight and they just regain it. And so we want to avoid weight regain, right? So being in a slow to moderate deficit is better, because it helps you regulate your hunger and your satiety, which is one of the principles that we're talking about at the moment. And it just feels more sustainable overall. So aside from overall caloric intake, we also want to focus on our food choices because there are particular types of foods, nutrients, and food groups that help with the regulation of hunger. In particular, if we keep this super, super simple, we want to focus on whole foods first and foremost. Whole foods over processed foods, even if the caloric intake and the nutrient breakdown is the same, right? So this means that having a chicken breast is going to keep you fuller and more satiated, and you're going to eat less than having a protein bar, okay? Now, I know that the macronutrient profile there isn't exactly the same, but you get what I'm saying, right? Some people won't eat whole food for protein. They'll just eat some protein bars and stuff like that because they're like, oh, I'm just getting my protein in. But then they have a hard time with hunger and satiety regulation. There's really good research showing that whole food consumption helps manage hunger and satiety and reduces caloric intake way more than processed foods, even when everything is the same from a nutritional perspective. You guys may or may not have heard of Dr. Kevin Hall. He is like the GOAT of nutritional research pretty much. He retired recently, unfortunately. But he is like the best nutrition researcher when it comes to looking at the effects of processed food consumption on overall health and body composition. And he did this one like landmark study where they took a bunch of people and put them on one of two diets. One was a highly processed diet and one was a minimally processed diet just of whole foods. But the caveat was that both of the diets were pretty much identical from a nutritional perspective. So they had the same caloric density, meaning that for the same amount of food, it had the same amount of calories. It was matched for sugar, sodium, macronutrients, fiber. It was matched for calories presented. So it was matched for pretty much everything. The main difference was the degree of processing. And over 14 days, those that were consuming the processed diet consumed on average an additional 400 calories per day. So again, nothing was different from a nutritional perspective, simply the degree of processing. And people ate an additional 400 calories, and I think they gained an extra somewhere between 3 to 5 pounds in those 14 days, which is pretty significant, right? And it just goes to show you that the degree of processing of food influences our eating behaviors because there's a different mouthfeel, they taste different, the palatability is different, they're easier to eat, they're easier to overconsume, they don't affect our hunger the same way. So in general, if we can lean more on whole foods, it's going to be better for hunger and satiety regulation by far, even if we're not thinking about the nutritional value of the specific foods. You want to eat as many whole foods as possible and limit processed food consumption. Besides the processing level of the food, we also want to double down on protein and fiber. Obviously, again, mainly from whole foods, because protein and fiber, out of all of the nutrients, are the most satiating, meaning that on a per calorie basis, they help keep you the fullest. Okay, so 100 calories of protein and fiber will help you feel fuller than 100 calories of fat or simple carbohydrates, even if they're coming from whole foods, right? So step 1, whole foods. Step 2, double down on protein and fiber. And then step 3, I would say double down on caloric density. So what the hell does that mean? Some foods have lower caloric density than other foods. If you think about things like fruits and vegetables, they have very low caloric density because you get a lot of food for very little calories. Why? Because they contain fiber, they contain a ton of water, so you're getting a lot of volume for very little calories. So you can get a lot of food, and that's going to help you manage your hunger and your satiety, even if the caloric intake is relatively low. Because one of the things that helps manage our hunger and our satiety is actually how much our stomach stretches. We have things called mechanoreceptors in our stomach, and they sense stretch in the stomach, and they essentially signal to our brain that we're feeling full, right? That's why if you eat and have a lot of water with your meal, you might feel a little fuller than if you don't have water, even though the water doesn't have any like actual nutritional value, like doesn't have any carbs, fats, or protein, obviously. Same can be said for food. So things like oranges, any fruit really has pretty low nutritional density. Or caloric density, I should say. This is why fruits are great for fat loss. And whoever tells you on social media that fruits are full of sugar and you shouldn't eat them, just like, please don't listen to that person. Vegetables are great for the same exact reason. So again, we want to double down on whole foods, protein and fiber, and low caloric density foods, right? So those are the main variables when it comes to food choices for managing hunger and satiety. And the last thing I was going to mention here is nutrient timing. When you eat really matters. And there's a couple of variables we want to focus on. First and foremost, breakfast consumption is important. You've always heard that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's kind of like a cliche, but it really is important. There's great research showing that people who eat more of their food earlier in the day versus later in the day, so aka a big breakfast and a big lunch, compared to like a moderate breakfast or a small breakfast, a moderate lunch, then a huge dinner. People who eat more earlier in the day have better hunger and satiety regulation. And not only do they have better hunger and satiety regulation, they also have greater energy expenditure. Okay, so they burn more calories and they eat less calories. And there's like ample amounts of research to show this. There's a really cool study. I forget what journal it was published in, but essentially they took overweight and obese women and they placed them on one of two diets. Both of the diets were isocaloric, by the way, meaning they consumed the same number of calories. It was about 1,400 calories per day. The breakfast group consumed, I think it's half the calories at breakfast, so 700 calories at breakfast, and then it was like 500 at lunch, and then the remainder at dinner, so a pretty small dinner. And then the dinner group was the complete opposite. I think it was like 200 calories at breakfast, or 250 calories at breakfast, 450 calories at lunch, and then like 700 calories at dinner. So they're skewing it towards a big dinner or skewing it towards a big breakfast. And the women that consumed the larger breakfast had better hunger and satiety regulation throughout the day. They reported being less hungry. They had slightly greater energy expenditure as well. So they burned more calories, probably because they had a little bit more energy throughout the day. So they moved a little bit more and they burned more calories. And not only was it self-reported, it was also corroborated by blood work. So they took blood work, looked at things like ghrelin, looked at things like leptin, and what they showed was that hormones associated with hunger, things like ghrelin, leptin, were the hormones were favorably affected by consuming breakfast because there was lower ghrelin, which means lower hunger. There were higher leptin levels, and leptin is associated with satiety regulation, right? So we want to have a big breakfast, guys. We don't want to be skipping breakfast, okay? And if you do skip breakfast, I mean, at the very least, we don't want to be having the majority of our food late at night. We definitely want to eat more earlier in the day because the research is super clear that it definitely results in better hunger and satiety regulation and better weight loss outcomes as well. If you're somebody who likes fasting, everybody who fasts wants to skip breakfast. I would encourage you to skip dinner. So wake up, have food. Some people are like, but I train fasted in the morning. That's fine. I would still encourage you to have something small, maybe like half a scoop of protein powder and like half a banana, just so you have some energy for your training. And then after training, have a pretty big breakfast. And it doesn't just have to be breakfast. It's just eating more of your food earlier and eliminating food, a large amount of food intake late at night. Because the opposite of eating a big breakfast is having a really big dinner. And the thing is that when you have a really big dinner, it also affects sleep quality. And the research is pretty clear on this as well. Because if you are having to metabolize food when you're going to sleep, your core body temperature is elevated. You're not going to be resting the same way. It's going to be harder to get a quality night of sleep. So in general, it's putting more of your food, or I should say eating more of your food earlier in the day, limiting food intake late at night is going to be a very useful nutrient timing strategy to help you manage hunger and satiety. And the last thing here is meal regularity when it comes to timing. So eating at the same times every day has been shown to help with hunger and satiety regulation and be associated with better weight loss outcomes. But aside from eating at the same time every day, having similarities with your caloric intake is also beneficial. So breakfasts being about the same size every day, lunches being about the same size, right? So if your breakfast is 500-600 calories, it should be a very similar amount from day to day, meaning that you should consume the same amount of food at every meal. So it's not just about eating at the same time, it's also about eating the same quantities and having structure with your meals. There's cool research showing that both of those variables, so eating at the same times, as well as having similar sized meals. And again, this doesn't mean that breakfast, lunch, and dinner are a similar size. It means that breakfasts in general are a similar size, lunches in general are a similar size. Both of those variables are associated with better hunger and satiety regulation and better weight loss. So again, the second variable or the second principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should help support or should help regulate hunger and improve satiety. And we can do that by focusing on overall food intake, aka caloric intake, our specific food choices, so focusing on whole foods, protein and fiber, and caloric density. And third, nutrient timing, eating more food earlier in the day, ideally a big breakfast, limiting food intake at night, and having regularity with our nutrition as well. The third principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should be enjoyable, okay? You should enjoy the way that you eat, because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stick to it long term, right? I think as humans, it's pretty obvious that we naturally gravitate towards things that we enjoy, and we gravitate away from things that we don't enjoy. And that's why I'm not a big fan of this whole perspective that in order to be healthy and fit, you have to have crazy amounts of discipline. Like, yeah, some discipline is necessary, obviously, but you don't have to be extremely disciplined, because extreme discipline means that you are doing things that you don't enjoy every single day, and you're just really disciplined enough to just do them anyways. And that's just not true. Most people would characterize me as a disciplined person when it comes to nutrition and fitness, because I eat healthy every day, I prepare my meals, and I go to the gym. And I don't miss, but it's not because I'm disciplined. It's because I enjoy those things, right? So yes, there are days where I don't want to go and I still go. It requires a little discipline, but in general, I really enjoy going to the gym. I really enjoy eating healthy. I really enjoy my overall lifestyle when it comes to health and fitness. And that is the goal when it comes to your nutrition as well. I can't tell you how many times I talk to potential clients who want to work with us at Fit for Life Academy, and we start talking about nutrition, and they're like, man, like, I started doing this diet that I followed online and it was working. I was losing weight. I just hated it. And so I couldn't stick to it. It's like, I just need to be more disciplined so I can stick to it. It's like, actually, no, you don't need to be more disciplined. You don't need to follow that diet if you hate it. And in fact, if you hate it, you shouldn't follow that diet, because the perfect diet can look differently for everyone. And that's because the foods that we enjoy are different, right? They're influenced by the foods that we ate when we were a child, and our cultural background and our lifestyle and our family preferences. Like, the things that we do, the things that we eat are influenced by variables outside of our diet. And we should take into account those variables so we can enjoy our diet, okay? And this is why, if you guys have heard me talking this whole time, I haven't said once a healthy diet means you need to eat 8 ounces of beef with every meal and 1 serving of broccoli, because it's just not true. I talk about nutrition from a principled perspective and a behavior perspective. You should eat more fruits and vegetables. You should eat this amount of protein, but you can eat the fruits and veggies that you enjoy. You can eat the protein sources that you enjoy, because that makes the whole process more enjoyable. That means that you actually enjoy the way that you eat. And if you enjoy the way that you eat, it's easier to stick to it. And if it's easier to stick to it, you're going to have better long-term success, right? It's kind of logical thinking. Now, I want to bring up the caveat, though, that there does need to be some boundaries, because enjoyment doesn't mean eat whatever you want, whenever you want, and eat how much you want, right? Because if you're listening to this and you have goals around losing weight and improving health, doing those things is what got you to where you are now, where you're frustrated and uncomfortable with your body, with your habits, with your behaviors. And so there needs to be a change. So there do need to be boundaries, right? But again, those boundaries are the habits and behaviors that I'm talking about. And you can meet those habits and behaviors with your personal dietary preferences so that it is as enjoyable as possible. So again, the third principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that it should be enjoyable, and that simply means that you meet your nutritional needs with the specific foods that you enjoy eating that are influenced based off cultural norms, based off family dynamics, based off, how you grew up eating as a kid, what your lifestyle is like, what's available to you, all of that good stuff. The fourth principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that your diet should support your overall goals. And this is really specific because there is no quote unquote overall perfect or optimal diet, because we can modify our diet based off what our goals are. Okay, so there are specific foods that we can eat more of or less of depending on what our goals are. For example, if we want to focus on building muscle, obviously we want to consume more protein. We also want to make sure that we're not in a calorie deficit. We are at maintenance or maybe even a slight surplus. So there are things that we can do to tailor our diet to our specific goal, right? In the case of building muscle, again, eating more protein, managing your caloric intake. If your goal is more fat loss, you still want to eat sufficient protein, but you want to reduce your caloric intake. So maybe we want to be eating foods that help us feel fuller, right? Because that'll help you with the hunger and satiety regulation piece if you want to lose weight. Now, on the opposite side of that, there are people that are really skinny and have a hard time gaining weight. So maybe the recommendation of eating foods that are really satiating all the time is not going to be optimal, right? So somebody trying to lose body fat, I may say, don't eat a ton of nuts and seeds because they're very calorically dense. And although those are healthy foods, they may not support your goal at the moment as best as possible. So they might not fit what an optimal diet is for you based off your particular goals. But somebody who's trying to gain weight and they struggle with eating sufficiently, I might say add some nut butter to your foods, add some oils to your meals so you can increase the caloric intake, right? So weight loss, weight gain, pretty simple there. But if we take it a step further and we want to say optimizing your diet for heart health, or optimizing your diet for brain health, there are small modifications that we can make to our diet for each of those, right? Again, nuts and seeds, polyunsaturated fats, olive oil, these foods are absolutely fantastic for cognitive function and brain health. They may not be the most optimal for fat loss because they're calorically dense, right? So we start to see how there are nuances here in terms of what an optimal diet is. And I'm not going to go into the specific foods for each particular goal because that could be a completely different episode specifically on that topic. But again, the optimal diet for you should be the diet that helps prioritize your particular goals. And the fifth and last principle of a healthy and sustainable diet is that it should be sustainable, all right? It's a pretty simple concept to understand. I feel like a lot of people don't ever think about this when they start dieting because they're excited to lose body fat and make a change. But sustainable simply means, can you do it long term? Can you do it for the rest of your life? Because if you can't, I would encourage you not to follow that particular diet. And again, I always get pushback on this because people are like, if you're dieting for a bodybuilding show or whatever, like that's not who I'm talking to, right? I'm talking to the general population, the general person who is busy, has a full-time career, has a family, and wants to be healthy and in shape. They're not looking to get into bodybuilding. They might just be trying to lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds or more to improve overall health, and not just improve overall health and not just lose weight, but be able to maintain those results long term. And for that person, doubling down on sustainability is incredibly important. So again, ask yourself, can I eat like this long term? And this might sound like it goes, or it's very similar to the enjoyability piece. Like, do I enjoy the way that I eat? That is a factor, but this also includes lifestyle related variables, right? Like, how often do you go out to eat? How often do you cook at home? How often when you go out to eat, do you go to a restaurant versus like fast food? Do you meal prep? How flexible is your diet? How often do you have celebrations come up? How do you eat when you go to a birthday party versus an anniversary, right? Like, all of these things are really important to take into account. Can you continue eating like this when life gets busy, right? So you need to build systems around your nutrition that are sustainable, right? So for example, if you tell yourself you're going to cook every single meal at home because you have to eat only whole foods and it needs to be as healthy as possible, in theory, that is absolutely fantastic. But is that sustainable? For most people, probably not, right? Because what happens when life gets really busy, and if you have little kids and you need to start taking care of them and they have sports and a bunch of stuff, right? So maybe cooking every meal at home isn't sustainable for you. Maybe cooking 2 or 3 days out of the week is, And then maybe investing in a meal prep service for some other days or lunches might be a little bit more sustainable, right? And I bring this concept up because we've also worked with a ton of clients that tend to be perfectionists and want to cook everything at home. And they get so frustrated when they have to go out and grab something from a fast food restaurant. And guys, it's just not the end of the world, right? Your diet needs to be flexible. It needs to meet your needs, but it needs to be sustainable. It needs to fit your particular lifestyle. And if I take this even a step further, I think this is why it's so important to align our goals with our lifestyle, right? For example, I'll tell you a really great story here. I had a conversation with a client once who was already really healthy. He was in great shape. He, was lean. Blood work looked great. He felt great. He trained really hard. He was muscular, but he didn't have a six-pack. He probably needed to lose another 10 pounds of body fat to have a six-pack. And he really wanted to have a six-pack. But he already had a super healthy diet. Like he was, eating at home for the majority of his meals, focusing on whole foods, all the stuff that I talked about here, because I coached him through all of that and helped him develop those behaviors. And he was frustrated that he couldn't get a six pack. And we looked at his overall lifestyle, and he would go out to his wife for a date night to dinner once a week. And he really didn't want to modify that. He liked eating whatever he wanted, having a couple of drinks with his wife. He also went out for ice cream and dinner with his daughters like once or twice a week, right? And he also had a pretty demanding job, so he couldn't add any more exercise. And I had a conversation with him, and I was like, if you want to get to this goal of having a six-pack, some of these things have to change because these are really the only things we can modify. Do you want to give up date nights with your wife? Do you want to give up making memories with your kids and having ice cream and going out to dinner with them and just enjoying yourself without having to track every little thing meticulously? And he was like, no, I don't want to give those things up. And I was like, all right. Well, then maybe for your particular lifestyle and your priorities, the goal of having a six-pack is the wrong goal, right? And this is why I say that your goals should be aligned with your lifestyle. And when we had that conversation, it was like it was such a big relief for him because he was stressing himself out and feeling stressed about this for no particular reason, right? And he was like, oh, I've just been chasing the wrong goal. And the goal for me is to stay strong, stay healthy, be in great shape. Like he already looked fantastic. He just wanted to take it to the next level. And I get it because so many of us get frustrated wanting to take it to the next level. And we just don't realize that our lifestyle and our priorities don't align with quote unquote taking our body to the next level. And I say quote unquote because it doesn't really mean anything to have a six pack or not have a six pack, right? What matters is being healthy, being in shape, looking good, feeling confident. But a six pack doesn't necessarily guarantee any of those. So align your goals with your lifestyle. And then if your goals and your lifestyle are aligned, make sure that your diet is also aligned with your lifestyle so that it is sustainable long-term. All right, guys, to wrap this up, to quickly recap, your diet should do 5 main things. All right. It should meet your nutritional needs. It should help you regulate hunger and satiety. It should be enjoyable. It should support your goals, and it should be sustainable. If at the moment your diet doesn't meet any of those, then there are probably some areas for improvement, right? And I really want you to reflect on this. Like if you have been struggling with weight loss or whatever particular goal you're trying to work on, and you keep blaming yourself for not being consistent or not being motivated or disciplined, I would challenge you to also think about whether or not the things that you're doing are optimal, right? From a dietary perspective, does your diet meet these 5 needs, these 5 principles of a healthy and sustainable diet? And if it doesn't, it's probably an area for improvement, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just not disciplined enough. You might just be putting effort and focus into a strategy that is not the best strategy for you long term. All right, guys, to wrap this up, again, I'm so excited to let you know that our Lean and Strong Challenge is starting on June 2nd. The doors officially open today, and if you're looking to lose body fat, and if you're looking to improve the quality of your diet and work on some of the things that I've shared here today, if you're looking to build muscle, learn how to train it more effectively, you want to do all of this in a healthy and sustainable way, you've been frustrated in the past with lack of progress or maybe yo-yo dieting, you lose weight, you regain it, you don't know what to do in order to keep your results long-term, I'm really going to encourage you to join us. It's a really cool way to see what it's like to work with us at Fit for Life Academy for 21 days. It's really affordable. Again, we're capping it at 60 spots. The first 30 people get an early bird discount. It'll be $97. If you're not one of the first 30 people, it'll be $147. And I didn't mention earlier, but if for some reason you join and it's not everything you expected and more, we just give you your money back. We don't want to take money from you if you're not happy with the service. It's a headache, and it's a headache that we can all avoid, right? And whether we have your $97 or not, it doesn't really make a difference to us. Like, we're not doing it for the money. We really want you to see what it's like to get the support and accountability that you need. So head down to the description of the show, fitforlifeacademy.health/challenge. The link is going to be down in the description, or you can just search it, or on my Instagram. It's literally going to be everywhere over the next 2 weeks. And I hope to see you there. Peace.